Hi, I'm Gary Leslie, and this is, once again, Highland Park Schools Update. And once again, our guest is Highland Park School Superintendent Dr. Scott Taylor. Thank you very much again for doing this.
Great to be here.
So let's get right to it. One of the things that we talked about last year when you were starting up the Pathway to Excellence program. And so for just for catch up for everybody, could you just describe what that is?
Sure. So in 2016, June of 2016, we had 61 residents, teachers, administrators, and that's about it, come together to help identify the 4 big needs our district had going forward. They ended up being a need to promote educational equity, a need to elevate the quality of instruction, a need to promote global education. We recognize that we're such a diverse community, we needed to put even more emphasis than we had in the past on globalism. And the 4th need we as a group identified was to provide more experiential learning opportunities for kids, things like mentorship programs and internships. So that group identified those 4 needs, and then later in that school year, 2016-17, last school year, broke those needs down into goals and action steps. We're in our 2nd year now, so I'm looking forward to sharing some of the status of our work.
It seems as if the goals and the purposes of the Pathway to Excellence kind of break down into the education techniques and the health of the student and the well-being of the student. So given that, before we get into the details of what you've done, do you see results yet?
Absolutely. Concrete results. So we've put a lot of eggs in the first basket that focuses on equity. Because promoting educational equity involves really culture change. The way we think has to change. The way we relate to people has to change. How we feel about ourselves has to change. It takes a lot to move a mountain when it comes to educational equity. So that's also the area in which we've seen the most outcome. Specifically in the way we have changed how we relate to our students. When I say we, I'm talking about teachers, I'm talking about principals, me, supervisors. We're already seeing our kids feel like they're more a part of the school community. Less discipline referrals, less bullying incidences, more talking at home based on what I hear from parents who've come up to me and said, hey, on the street, Dr. Taylor, my child came home and told me about this. More talk at home about how strong the relationships have been between the children in our school and their teachers. So that's right away something that we're all seeing. In fact, I just had a meeting with a stakeholder group. I had some parents, teachers. I even had some high school students in this group I met with. We were doing a little gut check on how discipline is playing out so far, because that's inherent in our strategic plan, our pathway. It's part of our goal to change the way we discipline students and work with their behaviors. And this group I just met with said, man, we're seeing a change. We're feeling a change. We feel like kids feel more a part of their school environment.
The group that was telling you this
today.
What was the group that you met with?
So the group is called the Discipline Study Group. It was pointed out, a group of students, teachers, parents, and administrators, about 12 of us, that meets every other month to talk about how we can improve the way we work with students who misbehave, But obviously there are many offshoots. You know, we end up talking about relationships, and we end up talking about how comfortable and safe our kids feel in school.
So let's talk about that just a little bit since you brought it up. How has the approach to discipline changed over the course of the last?
Great question. I'm glad you asked, because I'm very proud of the way we're shifting away from a punitive mindset when working with students who misbehave, break our rules, to a more what we call restorative mindset. I directed the administration to drastically scale back the use of out-of-school suspension to penalize students who might do things like fight with each other or disrespect a teacher. In the past, those students would be thrown out of school. Mm-hmm. What we came to finally realize is we weren't seeing any real benefit out of that process. I mean, the kids would come back and they would be repeat offenders. We'd send them back out. And, 9 times out of 10, students were going home to an empty household. No fault to the parents or guardians. They're working. Or these kids would sit in front of the TV and do really nothing constructive. So that was an automatic directive that I established. Instead, for the most serious cases, we now keep our students in school in an in-school suspension environment, but it is the in-school suspension environment that has us talking to the students, asking them questions about their feelings regarding the school, asking them if they recognize the harm that they did to other people because of their action.
So is this is a separate room that they're in most of the day, or separate?
Yes.
And who facilitates that kind of discussion?
We have full-time staff whose only purpose is to work with the students who are in this environment. We don't have many. I mean, I might have maybe one student on a particular day, go a couple of days without any students in in-school suspension, and then we'll have another day with 2 students. And so the person we hire to supervise those students is just tasked to do that, talk with the kids, try to restore them to the community. And that leads into the idea of restorative practices, which I'd like to talk about at some point in our discussion. Part of our way of establishing closer relationships between kids and teachers and having kids feel more connected to the school, even if they do break the rules, is for us to incorporate something called restorative practices. Restorative practices is not something we created. We didn't come up with it in Highland Park. It's actually a relatively popular methodology now in a lot of schools. We're working with an organization in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, called the International Institute for Restorative Practices, IIRP for short, to help us use certain protocols, certain strategies to get kids to talk to us, to talk to each other, very structured ways. We actually...
Is this for all ages?
For our middle and high school students this year, and then eventually we do envision this happening at the lower grades as well. Well, we are already doing something similar at Irving, our pre-K 1 school, and Bartle, the grades 2 to 5 school. But we believe the restorative practice work we're doing at the upper grades will end up absorbing the stuff they're doing down here. So it's consistent.
So what sorts of things, is this a daily thing? Is it?
It's a semi-daily thing. Students are engaging in something we call circle conferences or circle talks. Kids get around a circle. They are given a prompt. They have a talking piece. It's usually a stuffed animal or some special object that the teacher brought to the class. And they go around the circle, about up to 20 kids, and they open up about their feelings and about something that may have happened, about a reaction they may have had to some student's behavior who's sitting in that circle. Those happen once every couple of days, and the whole, we call them actually community building circles specifically. There are different kinds of circle talks, circle conferences. The ones I'm referring to are community building circles. We also incorporate something called the reactive circle. Some in the audience might have heard the term restorative justice circle used instead of reactive circle. They're the same things. We incorporate those circle talks when we have students who have done some kind of harm to the community. They got into a fight with another student. They said something mean, or insulting to somebody. We all have another kind of circle talk we call reactive circles that hone specifically in on one student's actions and the impact it had on the rest of the community.
Are students responsive to that?
Absolutely. One of the parents who was in this discipline study group meeting I mentioned to you a couple of minutes ago has 2 children in our middle school and said, my kids come home and tell me that they feel like, thanks to the circles and the relationships that they've developed with the teachers, they have people they can go to if they need to talk. The kids are referring to the teachers in this case. The circles have strengthened the bonds with everybody, but most especially the kids and the teachers, we believe. And that testimony was powerful. We're in the infancy stage, so our vision is to have these circles semi-daily. Right now they're happening once every other day. I'm talking about maybe doing it every day at some point. And then, like I said, pushing it down to the lower grades.
Are these restorative practices used when an unusual event happens? So, I mean, we're a few weeks away from what happened in Las Vegas.
Right.
And I would think that there would be something in the schools that would have to be reactive to that, and just to the kids may not be fully aware. They may be more fully aware than we think. Do the teachers or the people that are running these sessions, do they address that sort of thing?
Absolutely. We have encouraged the teachers, we've condoned the teachers' actions to react to these tragic incidences that might happen, or things even more locally that might occur that we've heard through the grapevine are impacting our kids' psyche, and already have done that. In fact, post-Vegas tragedy, I know some of our history teachers facilitated circle conferences because it was very difficult to not confront what the kids were likely feeling in a class. So they use the circle to pull it out of the kids and just face it.
Is it more like pulling out what they feel about it, or is it something that there's a directive that's on a school level to say this is sort of the thing?
It's individualized. We give the teachers autonomy, those who were trained specifically in how to work, in these circle talks, to use their own prompts. But every teacher knows the opening salvo to a circle talk has to be something that will help promote a safe holding environment. Even if our kids come January have forged good bonds, relationships, if something comes up that prompts a circle in reaction to a tragedy or some other event, you still need to make sure that the kids understand that what they're about to talk to is they can talk about in a safe holding environment. So oftentimes the first question will be, hey, let's just do a quick whip around the circle. And I want each of you to use one word to describe how you feel right now, an emotion that you are feeling. And so every child will go around the room: sad, angry, frustrated, aggravated. It's an opportunity first to make sure the kids recognize that a lot of them are feeling the same way, and then the teacher may feel more comfortable to graduate to more complex questions like, ultimately we want to be able to have a discussion about what down the road the kids can do to make themselves feel more comfortable or safe when something like what happened in Vegas happens.
Mm-hmm. So how often do these sessions occur? I think you said every other day.
Well,
and are they in a particular time of the day?
They're not religiously implemented every other day. My vision is to get there, but it all depends on the teacher. I mean, I do have some teachers who feel like the circles are just working so beautifully that they want to have them facilitated almost every day for maybe 5 or 10 minutes. An effective circle conference really takes 20 to 30 minutes. So it does encroach on instructional time, which means we have to, as a district, think about how we're going to accommodate all that.
So I would think there's another piece of this puzzle that I think you want to talk about, the cultural competency. And I would think that has a big interrelation with what we just talked about. Yeah. Could you just talk a little bit about cultural competency?
Well, it does. I mean, if we're going to have kids feel like they're part of the school community, restorative practices is fine. But if our faculty isn't sensitive to the different cultural needs that our kids have when they come to the classroom, well, then we're going to be, for every good thing we're doing with restorative practices, we'll be missing the boat on other things if we're not being culturally responsive. So alongside of all this work we're doing with our staff to promote restorative practices, we're also encouraging our teachers to recognize how they're relating to kids, not just students who have maybe certain specific cultural traits that are commonly recognized. We're a very diverse community. We have students coming from 59 different nations of origin. Our kids are speaking at least 29 different languages. So, look, it's obvious that a student from China might bring some cultural traits to the classroom that the teacher has to adapt to. But, our Caucasian students have certain cultural traits that they might bring to the classroom that we're not aware of, So what we've done is we've helped to start in this work we're doing to be more culturally responsive. We've compelled our teachers and our leaders to recognize that they have hidden biases. And we're doing that. We actually did that by having them take an assessment online, which I encourage everyone to take. Harvard University and a very reputable organization called Teaching Tolerance collaborated to develop a web-based assessment tool. You go on the web, you could choose from one of 13 categories: gender, race, weight, I mentioned gender, all kinds of different subgroups of people that we may interact with on a daily basis. People who were big, people who were skinny or small, people who were black, people who were not black. We had them take this tool. We had the teachers choose whatever category they were interested in. And the tool, which takes about 15 to 20 minutes to complete, ends up pumping out a score and a little analysis to explain what may be unconscious, hidden, implicit bias we have towards people in these categories that we chose. So, for instance, I took a bias assessment on weight, people's weight, and the implication was that I was biased towards one particular category of person. I'm not going to tell you which class, but we had all our teachers do that, and I didn't ask them to share publicly. I did ask them to reflect, and I said, look, we're going to be using that data. We did this in September. We had them take this test in September. We're going to use that data through June. 13 times we're going to have meetings between now and June after school, all about cultural responsiveness, and we're going to ask you to go back to that data. Our vision is to have them reflect inwardly about what their hidden biases might be, which could result in microaggressions.
Yeah, I was going to ask how receptive in general were people. I can tell you that for all the old timers out there who worked at Bell Labs and Bellcore and those places, and we used to have sessions like that back in the old days, and people were very resistant to admitting that they needed to adjust some of their underlying prejudices, because they said, I'm not prejudiced. And so how difficult has it been?
Well, I'd say I haven't detected any overt resistance. My job is a lonely one. People are not often open to coming right out and telling me that they're resistant to something. So I haven't seen any of that. If they are, that means, wow, we have a problem. I'm not sensing there's a lot of subtle resistance, but I'm sure there are people. It's human nature, like you're suggesting, has been your experience. It's human nature. I'm sure there's some people who feel that, you know what, this is a bunch of hocus pocus, bunch of baloney. And even if I do have hidden biases, look, I'm not going to necessarily change them. This is who I am. What we're trying to do, though, is point out that how that who I am can be really detrimental to not only a kid's growth, social, emotional, and academic growth, but to job satisfaction. I mean, for every child who you're not being sensitive to culturally, you are compounding or aggravating the lack of quality in your classroom and even in your professional quality of work. So really, there's really a selfish reason to be focused on this. It's about being a better teacher, enjoying what you do in the educational field, and obviously also helping kids.
Which is really the whole idea. And is this an approach to hopefully addressing things like the achievement gap and things like that because teachers may not be aware of how they're reacting to somebody with a hat that was backwards or, dressed a certain way?
Highland Park, I'll put it right out there. Highland Park has done a great job resting on the laurels of a group of students who tend to always perform at the top of their game. We're still a high achieving district. We're A+ ranked by niche.com. I go on our website, you'll see all kinds of accolades and recognitions. U.S. News and World Report, silver medal, one of the top 700 high schools in the country. However, a lot of that has come off the backs of a group of students who just consistently achieve. For whatever reason, it's the other students who we've neglected for various reasons. One, because I don't think we've been culturally responsive to their needs, so they've been left behind. And two, we haven't given enough attention to how they feel about their relationship with the school, both things of which have resulted in low achievement among that group of students. And frankly, I mean, for those who really buy into the rankings and are looking for more accolades, it behooves us, to work with all of our students, because who knows where we could be as a district if we were more culturally responsive, we improve relationships between our teachers and our kids, between our schools and our kids. I think it's the core group of kids who were left behind, who, are here when it comes to the achievement gap, not here, who could end up being here if we do all that work.
What are you going to look at to see to measure how effective what you're doing is?
So it's hard to, there are not a lot of metrics that allow us to, except for survey data, which is qualitative, mostly qualitative data, to measure the success of our work with restorative practices and cultural responsiveness. We will be implementing culture assessments at the end of the school year to get a check on how kids are feeling about the culture of the school. I think ultimately, if we're looking for quantitative data to measure success, it's going to have to come in our graduation rates, our absenteeism rates, our tardy rates, our standardized test score data, which, I'm a little on the fence about the reliability and validity of standardized assessment results, but nevertheless, we might see an uptick in our standardized test scores as well. Those are the things I think that we will be able to use to quantify success. But I think the survey data is going to mean a lot. And then, look, when you walk down the street and you hear something great about the school district, now, next year, the following year, you'll know, if you start hearing that more and more, that we're obviously doing something right.
One thing I want to get to that was part of the pathway to excellence was the individualized instruction, which I think is the same thing as differentiated instruction.
It is.
Okay, so could you just describe that and where we're going with that?
First of all, the phrase differentiated instruction is becoming passé, only because it's been overused. And when people hear it, they roll their eyes and they say to themselves, especially people who are in the field, Oh yeah, differentiated instruction. They've been talking about that since the 90s, but we all know how difficult it is to do that.
Passe is my business, so I understand.
So I like to refer to what we're doing as individualized instruction, okay? Because, look, it means what we're trying to do through cultural responsiveness and through restorative practices and through some other techniques I'll share with you in a second, hone in on every child's individual academic needs. So we're not just going to differentiate how we instruct, we're actually going to think really carefully about what kids bring to the classroom and then wrap our arms around them and figure out how we can touch them academically, socially, and emotionally. But more specifically, we've changed our language arts model, especially at grades K-5 level, and our math instructional model, so that there's a whole lot more of kid activity and a lot less teacher-directed activity. So I walk into a classroom down here at Bartle on any given day, and it's rare that I see teachers in front of a classroom of columns and rows, arranged desks, lecturing the kids. Most of the time, I see the kids in small groups or even working independently, almost all the time also working with the teacher, maybe in a corner in a small group, on individualized tasks that are being provided in accordance with their rate of growth. Mm-hmm. So the models I'm talking about by name are the math workshop model, mm-hmm, and the reading workshop and writing workshop model. The workshop term is used a lot there because the whole idea here is we're making kids think about learning math and language, reading and writing in particular, like it's in a working environment, not a lecturing environment.
Let me make sure, because I want to make sure that I understand. It seems to me, correct me if I'm wrong, that you're talking about two things. One is an approach to teaching, which is experiential as opposed to just sitting there and having it fed to you. And then there's this differentiated part where you have 1, 2, 3, 4, or maybe more groups that each are on different levels.
Well, I see how you might think it's different, but it's actually the same. I mean, teaching is about, it's a lot of things, right? You know, it's about how you manage your class. People often think of teaching as what the teacher is doing for the kids directly, right? You know, so, and the traditional thinking is lecture model. You know, if the teacher's teaching, it means the teacher is standing up there giving the kids information. Teaching nowadays, especially here at the K-5 level, is more about being the guide on the side, not the sage on the stage. And being the guide on the side means teaching kids how to manage themselves in these little groups, using certain management techniques, and then as well sitting down with them and using prompts and sometimes providing them information directly. I mean, there's still a place for that, you know, lecturing, but doing it in small groups.
But understood there, but all these, in an individual classroom, you can have multiple groups that are each on different levels, correct?
Correct.
So that means the teacher is coming up with what, different lesson plans for each one of those groups?
No, it means the teacher has already set up stations, centers, or a variety of different activities with tiered, leveled, self-directed tasks in these stations, you know, among these activities. And the kids, after having spent a month being conditioned, acculturated to the way of the classroom, can self-regulate and know that they'll move around those classrooms and they'll interact with the tasks that they know are for them, but the ones that they feel most comfortable completing.
And so would the idea be that if there are several levels among the groups, that they're all kind of helping each other with, climb up to the next level?
And that's like, look, I mean, when you walk into a workshop, what are you doing? You're building things. You're interacting with people. You're doing it sometimes in different parts, stations of a room. A wood workshop could have you sawing something in this section of the room and then maybe designing something in this section. That's why we call it the workshop model, except kids now are designing, thinking, interacting, working independently around the topics of math and language.
So let me just ask you, get away from the Pathway to Excellence questions and just get to, this is a new year, it's a new school year. We're in October already. Have you seen an uptick in students? Do you have more teachers? Do you have any changes in staff? Anything new in?
Yeah, it's a great question. Yeah, we actually, interestingly, about a week prior to school opening, we had about 35 students register for school. We've never seen that before. So our numbers shot up. Not to the extent in which we have a problem with the classroom size or staffing, but we were surprised by that. Our demographer told us that we'd be seeing between 50 and 100 students be added to our rolls over the next 5 years per year. So, we're looking at a 500 student increase likely in the next 5 years.
I'm sorry, say that again?
500 student increase.
That's what I thought you said.
Likely over the next 5 years, not all at once. And that's obviously a result of all the new developments coming up. And our demographer actually also traced the shift in age of our families, and residents in town. So take into account the move in from outside of young families to existing homes, not the new development. So yeah, we're looking at 500 new students. Already saw 35 the week prior to the opening of school, on top of the other kids who registered over the summer. We're seeing more and more, unfortunately, we're seeing more and more students be declared homeless, which is disconcerting. And so we're also seeing more and more students come to us at the lower grades with behavioral challenges. We can't explain why. I've done some research at Rutgers about this, reached out to them. I've spoken to members of our town council and other administrators at the borough level, and we don't have a clear reason why we're seeing an uptick in kids with behavioral problems. I'll venture to say, my assumption is it has something to do with the lack of funding support in Trenton for social services that was once there, that's no longer there to help these struggling families.
Any impact to special needs students? Do we seeing more of them? Or?
So the kids who come to us at Irving with these severe behavioral problems oftentimes end up becoming classified, and that allows us to assign them an individual education plan, an IEP, which unlocks additional services that we can now provide. This is the first year we hired a mental health specialist in the school district. A woman who we grabbed out of the Rutgers psychology department, who is a full-time mental health specialist. Her only job is to provide families wraparound support and kids, of course, support, counseling, who need it. So her day is actually unorthodox. We allow her to come in later sometimes when she has to go make home visits in town at night to provide additional services, which could mean something as complex as medical care needs to as I shouldn't say mundane, but as focused as mental health services.
Well, we have covered a lot of ground. Is there anything that we didn't cover that you wanted to?
Anything we didn't cover, I'll save for next time.
Okay, so it's something to look forward to.
Absolutely.
But it sounds like you're off to a roaring start with the year, and it sounds great. Actually, we look forward to seeing you next month to see what the progress is.
Wonderful.
So thank you again very, very much for this. I really do appreciate it, and thank you.